Okay, so welcome one, welcome all to the 2022 and 2023 HICPIC Systems Refresher Training. This is for sheltered programs and agencies. If you are a part of an unsheltered program and or agency, you are more than welcome to stay. But tomorrow will be focused on unsheltered and vice versa. I just want to make sure that everybody is claro and everybody is where they were intended to be. I know I asked already, but before we get into it, can you guys see the main screen? It should say basically what I said, the 22, 23 HICPIC refresher. Cool. Everybody good to go? Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, thank you, thank you. A couple housekeeping things, nothing has changed. If you are not speaking, you're more than welcome to mute yourself. Our trainings, we like to make them as interactive and human focused as possible. So if you have a question, ask, throw it in the chat, use the emojis, do what you need to do. And our trusty intern, Patricia, she is here and she'll be monitoring the chat as well as everybody who's speaking, and we'll be able to answer questions, so on and so forth. And yeah, all right, let's get into it. All right, so welcome to the refresher training. I actually have to give a big shout out to all of you because based on your feedback last year, we were encouraged to do a refresher training closer to the actual night of the count. So that we are very appreciative to. The feedback is always welcomed and considered. All right. So meeting agenda, we'll do some introductions, roles and responsibilities, program interview, the point in time count. Jim will do his PIT database demo. We'll go over some key dates, do a quick summary, and then we'll close. We'll get up out of here. My goal, I always say, I hope to give folks a couple minutes back on an afternoon. However, we will ensure that everything has been communicated properly and folks know what's going on and have those questions answered. And like I said a moment ago, by all means, use that chat. All right, so let's introduce a sliver of the team. This is not our entire HICPIC team, but these are folks who are involved in today. I'll let individuals introduce themselves. So me, my name's Brendan. I am the HICPIC Quality Coordinator here at Advancing Connecticut Together. You guys probably see a lot of emails from me, and yeah, Shannon, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Quinn Sheeran. I'm an associate with Housing Innovations. We work with BOSC Continuum of Care, and with the HICPIT, we mostly do a lot of bed change stuff on the HIC end of things, and then do some data quality checks on that. And on the PIT side of things, we ensure that data is in on a timely fashion, chase after people whose data is not in, and do some data comparisons on that as well.
Perfect, thank you. I don't know if Lindsay has jumped on yet, so Jim, you're up.
Excuse me. Jim Bombassi with Nomad Consulting. So we developed the PIT app, and I think most of you have been through this exercise before, so you're familiar with that. And then we help with generating the reports post-PIT, and obviously help desk support throughout the PIT process.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And Lindsay, she's the COC manager over in ODFC, Opening Doors Fairfield County. She should be on here soon, and she's just another piece of the puzzle. And we are greatly appreciative to have her and everybody else on the team. All right, quick overview of what we really just talked about, the project management. Everybody takes part in the project management, but Advancing Connecticut Together, we have that. Database and technology, Nutmeg IT, the bed counts and change forms, Housing Innovations, which is a representative of, or was representing CT BOSS, and then ODFC, just like we mentioned. Okay. What's the point in time count? There is a strong possibility that if you are on that call or on this call, then you are pretty familiar with the point in time count. But for those who are not, or who need a after the holiday refresher, it's a federal program focused on sheltered and unsheltered homelessness. In a nutshell, it provides a direct correlation between the funding and resources that HUD, sends our state. When do we perform the count? The count usually takes place traditionally in the last 10 days of January. So if it's not broke, don't fix it. We probably will never change the week that we do it. It's actually happening in 19 days from today, on the 24th. So get ready. We've been spared with weather. I don't want to jinx it, but no, maybe we can get one of those 60-degree days on the night of the count. Where are we counting? Everywhere. Obviously, we have made some adjustments and removed the service-based piece of the project, so it's not how it used to be back in the day. However, folks are still in the same places. They still need help and assistance wherever they are. So we'll always keep our eyes on that. What is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to end homelessness. I know it sounds like a fairy tale, but I really think if we continue doing the work that we're doing with all of you, sheltered, unsheltered, research teams, outreach workers, folks who are outside, figuratively and literally, we can really do this. So I know it might sound a little cheesy, but if you don't believe that, then probably wouldn't be in the right room.
Okay.
All right. So overview. So
No.
specific.
Mike, I'm at a point in time training.
Okay, yeah, if we could all just mute ourselves if we're not talking. All right, so to continue with what we were saying, as mentioned in the beginning of this is the sheltered piece of the puzzle. So the PIT, the point in time count, is when the continuums of care based on regions focus on folks who are experiencing homelessness. That includes emergency shelter, transitional housing, safe haven.
Brendan, you're
You
muted.
muted yourself.
Brendan.
And again,
Still
No,
muted. Still muted.
Brandon, you're still muted.
There you go.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could have said the cure for cancer and nobody would know.
Exactly. You were over there
You'll
going,
never
"Hey."
know. I had a nice flow. I had my turtleneck on. So basically what I was saying, I was just focusing on what we're doing today. Emergency shelters, transitional housing, safe havens. And for the other side of the house, those folks who are permanently housed, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing. So we will focus on those pieces. All of the supporting documents for those pieces will be available on our website, so on and so forth. And although our website hasn't changed, before we all get off this call, I will drop the links, drop the documents. You'll have everything that you need. Okay, so we'll focus on this a little bit later when Jim does his database demo, but we just wanted to put this in here to talk about how we do things. I mentioned that we removed the service-based piece out of the point in time count, and we're focusing heavily on data. So our online database, known as the PIT app, PIT database, where every agency either reviews. For those HMIS participating agencies, you'll just review and make sure all the T's are crossed, versus those non-HMIS participating agencies, you'll just enter that information in. So the good news is it is one central database for these record keeping pieces of the project. So we've been working with regional coordinators throughout, since we started this. We all know folks who do the PIT, we work all year for one night. Like a slogan I just made up, but we're going to continue to do that, and I think it's been successful and will continue to grow. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to transfer the crown over to Shannon, let her talk about some data entry, and then after this, Jim, I believe you're up, and then we'll keep it going.
Okay, the good news is that most of the work for the HIC has already been completed. Thank you all so much for your cooperation on that, for getting all your data in there, reviewing it, sending in bed change forms as needed, and answering our many, many questions that we have about the many projects that exist in our COCs. So we did that work back in November. Except for rapid rehousing, we'll have notes on that for the next slide. You did some review of that, but all of the work on the HIC for rapid is not done yet. We will be sending out, the COCs will be sending out an email this month for any last minute changes. And this is truly kind of extraordinary circumstances where money has become available for 20 extra beds in your shelter, or there's been a circumstance such as a fire or some kind of catastrophe where you've had to close a shelter, that kind of thing. So we'll send out one last thing to say before the night of the count, are there any last minute changes that need to be made? And the link to the bed change form is here on this slide, which will be posted, as Brendan said, on their website. But most of the work on this is done. Next slide, please. Rapid rehousing, HUD made the rule that the number of people on the night of the count for rapid rehousing has to match the number of beds. So that's why we asked you to look at your projects, make sure the address is right, and confirm that stuff. But the bed numbers won't be complete until after the night of the count. So we ask rapid rehousing, just like every other project type, and like we said, Jim is going to walk through this in a few minutes with you all, to enter or confirm your data by the 31st of this month after the night of the count. After that data is confirmed, the HIC will auto-populate to match the household and the people count. There's a guide that Jim created that's going to be posted also to the ACT HIC PIT page. And we'll give you the link to that page later on in this presentation. We'll stick it in the chat for you all. Oh, actually, Brendan already did. Thanks, Brendan. Next slide. So new and different for this year, we didn't know this when we did the presentations earlier in November. HUD asked us to report out on age categories. So for all of you who have projects in HMIS, the programming, Nutmeg has done the programming already to get this data for you, and you'll just need to review it and say, yes, that's accurate. Thank you to Nutmeg for making those last minute unforeseen changes that HUD threw at us. For those of you whose projects are not in HMIS and you're going to have to input the data, these are more data points that you will need to collect and then enter into the PIT database on those 7 days after the night of the count. So they're the breakouts for you. Again, they'll be on the slides for you to refer to later on. I think that's it for that slide. Next slide. So every project is responsible for entering and or verifying your data. So verifying if it's an HMIS, because the data will already be automatically pulled in there. Enter it if you're a non-HMIS program. All people count data for the night of 1/24/23. And we ask you to do that after that night, because truly you don't know any urgent emergent situations, which with this population is a thing, does happen frequently, that are going to prevent what's expected from happening, right? We have 20 people in the program, have had them for the last 3 months, but we're not going to enter the data or confirm the data until after that night, because you never know what can happen that night. So the 24th is the night of the count. The 25th, begin data entry or confirmation of that data, and complete that data entry or confirmation by the 31st, 1 week after the count. Next slide.
Okay, so we're gonna transfer that crown over to Jim,
Yep.
and he'll do his demonstration.
Yeah, and live screen share. Let's see. All right. Can you all see my screen? Yeah, good. Okay. Oops. So we're gonna, as has been reiterated by Brendan and by Shannon, that this is the sheltered version of the training, and this is sheltered meaning HMIS participating, HMIS non-participating, emergency shelter, transitional safe haven, rapid rehousing, and PSH programs. Similar to the initial training, not much different from the count last year, and I have noticed that many of you have started messing around with your people count data, which is great, especially the data coming out of HMIS and populating the PIT app. We will, before the night of the count, we will be refreshing all that. So just keep that in mind that it is just for test purposes right now. But the good thing is those of you who have gone in there and checked out your people count data as it's populating the PIT app, you'll be one step ahead of those who haven't had a chance to do that yet. So the rules for HMIS participating programs, as we talked about earlier in the season, back October, November, whenever that training was, emergency shelter, safe haven, transitional, PH, and RRH. There are some specific rules for your data coming out of HMIS. For emergency shelter, the enrollment has to be open and the person has to have an emergency shelter check-in that's dated for the night of the PIT count. For safe haven and transitional, they just need to have an open program enrollment. And for permanent housing and rapid rehousing, they have to have that open enrollment plus a move-in date that is dated on or before the night of the PIT count. For hotel motel programs, as we had talked about as well, that one of the new things for this year, aside from the open enrollment, there's also the hotel motel cost or service that is available. And we'll look at that as we go through the training as well, where that service has to be generated and dated for the night of the PIT count. And that's the trigger that will pull your individual's data into the PIT app. And the primary reason for that is last year, there was a lot of overlapping enrollment events. And that's because we had open hotel motel enrollments and also open rapid rehousing or PSH or emergency shelter enrollments where there was a check-in or a move-in date because the person staying at hotel motel had moved on, but the agency hadn't had time to exit the person from HMIS yet. So there was no mechanism to tell the system that the hotel motel scenario had changed other than the enrollment start date, enrollment end date. So now what we have for this year, we have that confirmation that has to occur in HMIS for your hotel motel programs, that the user actually has to create that service. Also, Shannon alluded to this as well, another new feature since the initial training is the rapid rehousing programs. So what will happen is for your HMIS participating programs, when you confirm your data, your beds will automatically populate. So that way, if you have households with adults and children, on the bed count side, you'll see that your units and beds families will populate based on the total number of households identified and the total number of people identified. For the households where there's just adults, where there's no children, the PIT app will update on the bed count side. It'll update your undedicated bed count. So you'll see that if you served 20 people in your households with adults only, then your bed count will populate to 20 people in the undesignated box. And we're going to talk about that a little further as well, because you will have a couple extra steps after you've confirmed your people count data. When you go over to the bed count side, you still have to confirm the data, but you also have to fill in a little bit more information because the system's just not going to know if those are also veteran specific, chronic homeless specific, things like that. So you will have to provide some zeros and also some values where appropriate. So if you're part of a non-HMIS participating program, and I'll reiterate this again too, and this is the first training you've been to, or you're not 100% familiar as a non-HMIS participating program, make sure you submit a help desk ticket to ensure that you're seeing all the programs you're supposed to see. Or if there's new programs that you're not seeing, obviously submit a ticket as well so we can get that program set up. Also similar to last year, which we didn't get a chance to talk about in the last training because this was just information that was provided a couple of weeks ago before the holiday, that the DOH-funded hotel motel programs are also going to be in play again this year. Last year, those programs used Smartsheets. You're going to continue to do that, and I've listed the programs down below here. So same process as last year. You're going to utilize Smartsheets, and then sometime after the night of the PIT count, Nutmeg will get that Smartsheet. We'll remove any duplicates that are appearing between the Smartsheet and the PIT app, and send that back so the hotel motel programs can go ahead and fill out their PIT tables again, as was done in the share. Okay, let me go to the PIT app itself, and we can walk through a few things there. So first, making sure everybody still remembers how to get where they need to get to, you're going to click on the point in time count tile. If you're a non-HMIS user, if we're able to mute that person.
Jim, I'm sorry, there's a question in the chat. It says
Okay.
two DV shelters listed. To clarify, we can manually enter the bed and people count.
Yeah, if they're a non-HMIS program and they can see their program in the PIT app, then they should, number one, the bed should already have been submitted for that, and then the people count data is manually entered. We're going to go through manual data entry as well. So when you log in, let me just jump back out to that. Again, reminder, if you're an HMIS user, you put your HMIS username and password and you click HMIS account. If you're a non-HMIS user, then you've been given a generic login. So you put your generic username or password and you click login. Do not click HMIS account. And also, again, if you're an HMIS user, make sure you click HMIS account. And then once you're in, you're going to click on the point in time count tile. And this is the unsheltered side. So we're going to click on sheltered counts. And this is for HMIS and non-HMIS sheltered programs. Okay, so as we talked about for emergency shelter, the trigger for an emergency shelter client is going to be that they have an emergency shelter service dated on the night of the PIT count. If they don't have that, you're going to see all zeros here, okay? So make sure when you look at your emergency shelter program that you're ensuring that you're creating those services. And we'll go look at an example right now. Let me back in. Yeah, okay. So for that example of the emergency shelter client, let's grab an agency here. And I know obviously all of you who handle your emergency shelter programs, you're familiar with this, but just to show it, because I want to show the hotel motel service as well. As we said, number one, the enrollment has to be open. So we have to be making sure that the people we're counting, the emergency shelter service, in this case, we'll look at a hotel motel one, that is open. If it was a typical emergency shelter program, then it would be program tools, bed list resource check-in, and then for, again, whichever bed list the person is assigned to, you would go to your check-in screen and set it for the night of the PIT count. We'll just, let's say it was 01/03/2023. And if that were the night of the count, then anybody who was in your shelter on the night of the count, you just have to give them a check-in and save, and you're done. And that will trigger that person to be pulled into the PIT app. Okay, for those hotel motel programs, you're not going to use your check-in because the hotel motel programs don't use the check-in process. You're actually going to go to services and you're going to create just that generic hotel motel service that we've added to the programs. So you can do that. And it's this one here, the motel costs. Just make sure you date it appropriately for the night of the PIT count and save. And that will pull the person into the PIT app when you come in here to edit your data. So essentially what happens is the PIT app will pull in anything it sees as a valid enrollment on the night of the count. And again, for right now, because this is an emergency shelter, I haven't done any check-ins that were dated for yesterday. It's always going to be a day behind. And of course, on the night of the count, it's going to be looking specifically for services dated on that night. So if everything was done correctly, you would see your numbers here and you would scroll through and make sure that they're correct. When you get to the bottom, this is where you want to do your evaluation. So the PIT app is going to know that this particular shelter program, there's 46 total people. Now, obviously right now, those 46 people don't have their check-ins done, which is why this total number of persons is 0. So what the PIT app is going to tell you, it's going to tell you, here's the total number of persons enrolled, and here's the total number of persons enrolled who aren't counted. In most cases, this number is going to be much smaller. It's going to be maybe like 2 or 3, somewhere along those lines. And for an emergency shelter program, that's telling you one of two things. Either A, the enrollment for the person, there's something up there where either the enrollment may be incorrect, or they're somewhere in there, the enrollment's been closed, or B, the person doesn't have a check-in. So you just click on this button here, and that's going to tell you who all the clients are that aren't currently being counted. You can download this to an Excel sheet, and it'll give you the list of clients that you can go check. Like I said, in most cases for you, for agencies, these numbers are going to be small. But that will give you the client ID, and then you can go to HMIS. You can go and find that client. And again, if this was a hotel motel program, I would look to see if they had that hotel motel service. Or if it was a traditional emergency shelter program, I would go to the program tools and see if they had the check-in data the night of the count. Okay, and we have all the guides for these, the step-by-steps on where to look for an emergency shelter, where to look for hotel motel. But the main features here are going to be making sure that all your people that you expect to see are being counted in the total persons field. Okay. All the other tables above will auto-populate based on the data that exists in HMIS. So even the new age categories will parse out by the proper ages based on the data in HMIS. If you're looking through these tables, and you should, don't just trust 100% that it's correct, but if you're looking through and you see, total number of households for households with at least one adult and one child, if you see that number is lower than you expected, that's fine. Scroll down to the bottom here, and you can see who's being counted. So you can either see the total number counted there, or you can see who's being missed. Or if you don't see the client or household you expect to see, just submit a ticket. Let us know the program number, the program ID number. Let us know that you're expecting there to be 10 households, but you're only seeing 9. And we can go ahead and take a look at that with you to make sure that the appropriate number of people are being counted. Again, for the HMIS participating agencies, it's a lot of just validating that the data is pulling in correctly. And again, if you're surprised by any of the numbers on the table, that's, don't waste more than a few minutes trying to figure that out. Go ahead and submit a help desk ticket, and we can work on that with you. As I said in the original training that we had, follow that 5-minute rule. If you can't figure out in 5 minutes, you're not going to figure out in 10, 20, 30. So, don't bang your head against the wall. Let us help you out with that. Okay. So again, this was an emergency shelter example and a hotel motel example. Other examples for HMIS participating are going to be those rapid rehousing programs and your permanent supportive housing programs. Permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, remember, those require the housing move-in date in the head of household record. Okay, so that is a key to keep in mind. The head of household record is where the move-in date field lives for PSH and RRH. As long as all the household members are connected to the family appropriately, if the head of household has a move-in date that's dated on or before the night of the PIT count, then the data is going to get pulled in.
Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's a question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
If an emergency shelter has drop-ins that night who are not yet enrolled, can they be counted?
No, they would have to be, if it's an emergency shelter program, there has to be an open program enrollment and an emergency shelter check-in. If it's a hotel motel program, then it's a hotel motel enrollment with the hotel motel service. A drop-in center wouldn't be associated with the sheltered count. Okay, so again, that one-time field for rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing, the head of household, you have to have that dated on or before the night of PIT. If it's dated after the night of the PIT count, the PIT app's going to ignore it because the assumption is the person wasn't housed on the night of the PIT count.
There's another question in the
Yep.
chat.
Go ahead.
It says, can we count them as outreach? I think it's a follow-up to the question Avery posed.
It would be dependent upon the program type. If it's an emergency shelter program, then you would want to check them in. If it's not emergency shelter, then that would be considered either a warming center, drop-in center, or street outreach program. So if you have a program in HMIS that is functioning as both drop-in and emergency shelter, then we would probably have to discuss that, because a program can't be two things. It can only be one or the other.
Then Elaine asked another question. Can overflow might be what she means. So you could count someone as overflow, but they would still
have a check-in.
have to be enrolled and checked in, like Jim
Yes.
said, in order
Yep.
to be pulled into the database.
Yep. Okay. All right, so as we talked about, so we have PSH, RRH, you have move-in date, transitional and safe haven, just the enrollment start and end date. And then emergency shelter, they have the enrollment and the check-in. And then hotel motel, they have the enrollment and they have the hotel motel service. So those are the primary features needed in order to get a household pulled in and read. Let's just look at one real quick so you can see what a completed table looks like. In order to get the data read by the PIT app. So when you click on the edit or on the pencil, you'll see that the data will populate, will pull directly from HMIS and fill out your tables. Again, whether this was emergency shelter, street outreach, whatever program type, as long as all those criteria are met for the various program types, you're going to see data here. You're going to see counts. This is where you would be checking. Okay, yes, total number of households of 4 sounds accurate. Total of people 19. Yeah, that sounds good. That seems like it matches. And as long as you're confident with that, you can take a look at your demographics, make sure that there's nothing missing there. If your demographic counts are, in this case, we have a total of 19 people. If they didn't add up to 19, for example, you have somebody who refused to provide race, gender, ethnicity data. If you're able to get that at this point, that's great. It helps reduce the number of values that need to be extrapolated. But if not, we do have an extrapolation feature that automatically does it on the HDX population tables. But of course, getting as close to that 100% would be ideal.
Jim, there's another question in the chat. Oh, it was answered.
Okay.
I think. Someone else said, if the police brings a person to the shelter on the night of the PIT and they don't have an enrollment, they are not counted, correct?
Correct. The only way to get in the PIT app for an HMIS participating program is for there to be a program enrollment in HMIS.
But I would, go ahead, Jim, I'm sorry.
And I was just going to say, the only place where you could manually enter is if you're a non-HMIS program, then you can manually enter data and that would be that. But for HMIS, you have to have those things in place.
But I would say that if the police bring a person on the night of the count, then that person is staying at your shelter, that person should be enrolled.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That person should be counted because they are experiencing homelessness that night.
Yeah. So you would just enroll them in your shelter, give them a check-in, and you'd be done. So households without children, again, you would come and check your data here, 20 people or 20 households of 24 people. Again, if that sounded right, then you could go ahead and just keep moving on. The key here being, if you're surprised by any numbers coming out of HMIS, again, don't spend a ton of time trying to figure out why. You can take a few minutes to scroll down and take a look at who's being counted. So you can see here, total number of persons counted 43, total number of persons enrolled 43. So that's looking pretty good. So for this particular program, it looks like everything is matching up pretty well. But if we had 43 here and 42 here, and you had one person being counted here as not enrolled, that's where you want to click this button and see who that person is. Because you may be able to troubleshoot that quickly and say, okay, yes, this person's missing a move-in date, or this person's missing the check-in, or they're missing that hotel motel service. But after you've done that, and it still isn't resolved, I would definitely submit a ticket at that point. You've gone as far as we would expect you to go, and you've checked those triggers for that specific program type. So I would say submit the ticket and let us know what's happening.
Jim, there's another question. It says
Yep.
the age categories. Lindsay answered just now. Sorry.
Actually, I want to clarify that. The age categories, I know HUD is asking for them for emergency shelter and transitional housing, but the question is, are they for our rapid rehousing? And I would say permanent supportive housing as well. Jim, I'm not sure how that was handled in the.
It's across the board. All the programs are collecting, the data is collecting based on all those age categories.
They won't all be manual entry, but they'll get pulled in. Like I'm looking at a rapid rehousing project now, and it's showing that the populated numbers of people in the age categories there currently.
Yeah, that's what I have up on the screen. So whether this is PSA, any HMIS participating agency will pull in the age categories based on the HUD requirement. Again, there's just no way to. I mean, we could have set it up to where it's just ES and like outreach, or whatever, or TH, but then you would have one program type collecting age categories one way and all the others another way. So to keep it uniform, all program types will have the age categories across the board. And for the HMIS participating, it'll all be automated. You don't have to worry about anything. The other thing, when you get down to the bottom, as you, again, evaluate your data, once you have your total count, so you can see 43 total people, in this case, you would have your bed info, your confirmed bed info here as well. You will have to obviously explain if you have an overutilization or underutilization. We've talked about this a lot, year over year, we go through this. So overutilized, there's two, predominantly common reasons that a program is overutilized, meaning more people than beds. And that's because you have people sharing beds or you have cribs. Cribs don't get counted in your beds category. Then you have other. You have a very brief statement of other. I would just say don't waste a lot of time typing it out. It should be a very or fairly easy statement as to why you're overutilized for one reason or another. If you're underutilized, meaning you have fewer people than beds, you would want to explain that. There's no categories for you to identify there. Just provide a brief explanation. Once your HMIS data has been confirmed, you can certify and save. Or you can say that you're not finished and save, and then you can come back and finish later. But again, for HMIS participating, should be pretty straightforward. If I'll point this out that if you're an HMIS-based program and you're only designed to serve adults or children who are part of an adult household, and you do see data in your unaccompanied children boxes, you have essentially a child who's been disconnected from the household, and that is something you would definitely want us to help you out with. But if you're a YHDP, RHY, it would be expected that you can have data in these tables. So that is most likely not an issue. So keep an eye on those as well, because that's an indicator that there's something up if you're not designed to serve children who are unaccompanied. Okay. So I'll move on to the non-participating. That's going to be a little bit more in-depth, a little bit deeper dive on the tables to make sure the non-HMIS participating agencies understand the logic behind each table and how you need to sort your data in order to populate the tables. But before we move on to that, are there any other questions for HMIS participating program types or HMIS related data?
I would just like to place emphasis on including an underutilization or overutilization reason, because if we don't have that information, then you will inevitably get an email from one of us asking for clarification, because we need to make sure that we include as much information as possible when we're reporting those things to HUD. So it's super helpful to have that.
Yeah. And one other thing I will show for RRH, just a quick example here. So here's an RRH program. I'll go in and I'll edit the RRH people count that's coming out of HMIS. And as I scroll through, as long as everything looks good on how the RRH data is landing, and I'm happy with the totals, everything matches up, no overutilization, no underutilization, I'm 100% utilized. I'm going to confirm the data. Once I confirm the data, you'll see that where did I go? Here it is. That it's going to automatically update the beds for this particular program. But what it won't do is it's not going to fill out this table here, okay? The user is going to have to come and manually update this table. So we do ask that for RRH programs, once you've confirmed your people counts, you then come in and you check your subpopulation data if all 4 of your beds are for veterans, or if all 4 of your beds are for chronic homeless, whatever it might be, go ahead and populate that, and then you certify, okay? Your program will not show as complete or certified on the bed count side if you haven't taken that step. So please make sure to do that if you're a rapid rehousing program that uses HMIS. Okay. We have, as we talked about, we have some guides. We have plenty of guides available. This is just an example of that total person count guide. If you're an HMIS participating agency, how to handle or use that that feature. So if you need a refresher on that and you want the step-by-step guide, this guide is available to you on ACT's website.
Jim, there's another question in the chat.
Yep.
It says, to clarify, for PSH, if family enrolled but they are housed somewhere temporarily, aka voucher, not paying for housing, what do we do for a move-in date?
Well, if it's a PSH program, who is providing the housing support? Is it your agency or a different agency?
Sheila, would you like to unmute and be able to clarify, or are you going to write it in the chat?
This, I don't know the specifics. Oh, here she's saying, my agency staying with family. If they're staying with family, then they will not be pulled into the count. And that's appropriate because they're not checked in, they're not enrolled in your PSH yet. I mean, have a move-in date yet.
Yeah, if they don't have a move-in date, then they don't get counted on the night of the PIT count. Other items available, there is a table-by-table document that is also available on ACT's website. It is indexed, and the index are live, so you can go from table to table and you get detailed information. I'm going to jump into this now if everybody's ready to talk about the non-HMIS programs, if people feel comfortable moving on to that step. Okay. All right. So if you're a non-HMIS program, you should have or have something like PIT only in your program name. So that's your biggest giveaway that you're a non-HMIS program. The other way you'll know is when you go look at your people count data, the data collection fields are whited. They're white background versus gray background. Gray background would indicate that it's auto-populated, an auto-populated cell. So any PSH, rapid rehousing, transitional housing, emergency shelter, hotel, motel, non-HMIS program they're all going to look the same way. Okay. The key here is paying attention to the title of the table. Households with at least one adult and one child means that in order for you to put data on this table, you have to have at least one person over 18 and at least one person under 18. So if we had a household of one, we'll just say it's a chronically homeless household, you would have to have at least a 1 here and at least a 1 in any one of these other categories. Okay, so let's say we'll put a 1 here. You will have to provide zeros for any of the other fields that don't apply. Now, the database knows that if you put data in the table for households with at least one adult and one child, and if you say one household, it knows that this number has to be at least 2 or higher. Okay, to be on this table, every household has to have at least 2 people. You can have more, but it can't have less. So if you tried to do something like this and this would be a problem, because 2 households, this number would have to be at least 4. So if I tried to save the database after putting in this data, I'm going to get an error message that there's a miscount somewhere. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that there has to be at least 2 people for every household if you're going to fill out data for this table. And the database also knows that for every household, there has to be at least 1 person under the age of 18. So if I said 2 households, and then I said 3 here, or how about even this is a more probable scenario, I did that, okay, you would get an error message because there's only 1 person under the age of 18, but you're counting 2 households. So again, the database is going to know that's a problem, and it's going to give you an error message. The number here has to be at least 2. Okay. Now, for those of you who've done this for a while, you know that if you have a household where it's an adult child and they live with their parent, so you have that 35-year-old parent and that 19-year-old child, that household does not go on this table because there's nobody under the age of 18 in the household. That household would go here in your households without children. Okay. So make sure when you're populating these tables, however you sort your data, or whatever method you use to look at your data for these tables, keep in mind that this table you have to have a household of at least 1 adult and at least 1 child. Okay. You're also going to want to take note of any youth households where the parent is somebody between the ages of 18 to 24. So we could say we have that scenario here. We have 1 person, 18 to 24, and we can say that one of the children belongs with this parent. So in this case, you would want to take note of that because you're going to need to provide more information on that household further down in the subpopulation tables. So you would have a scenario where an unaccompanied parenting youth household would be that 18-year-old parent with 2-year-old child, and there's nobody else in the household over the age of 25, okay, or over the age of 24. But if it's a household where you have a 3-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 45-year-old, that would not be an unaccompanied youth scenario because you have somebody presenting with the family who's over the age of 24, okay? And I just want to make that note because, again, when we get down to that subpopulation table, you're going to need to make sure you carve out the information on those unaccompanied youth households. All right, so back to your households with at least 1 adult and 1 child. We'll say that we have 2 households. We'll say one of those households chronically homeless, which is fine. It could be all of them, could be 1, could be none. Total number of people under the age of 18 has to be at least 2. 18 to 24, again, this could be anything. And again, this could, as long as there's at least 2 people over the age of 18 and at least 2 people under the age of 18, the rules of this table will be satisfied and you won't see any errors. Total number of people being counted is 5. So once you've put all that in, if that looks correct, then you can go on and provide your gender information. Okay, remember, the gender information, you want to try to get as close to 100% as possible. So if you have 5 people, try to provide gender info on all 5. If for race and ethnicity, again, same thing. Try to provide race and ethnicity information on all 5. And for race, again, try to provide gender information on all 5 if you have it. I'm just going to put some zeros in. Just keep in mind, if you don't have a value for a particular field, you cannot leave it blank. You have to provide a 0, okay? So make sure you always provide that 0 value. Once you've done that, you can move on to the next table, and this would be households without children. Households without children means just that. There's nobody under the age of 18 in the household. So this would be the table where you could put that household where you have the 35-year-old parent and the 19-year-old adult child. So that would just be one household, one person here, and we would have another person there. So that would be how that household would be represented. Of course, if you have a lot more households, then you want to just make sure you fill in the fields that make sense for the age groups of the households you're serving, provided that, again, that there's just no place for you to put data for somebody under the age of 18 here, okay? So we'll just say, we'll leave that. We'll say we have 3 households, and we'll leave that as a 1, and we'll put something there, and we'll put 1 here. Okay, now, total number of persons can never be less than total households. They can be equal, but they can't be less. So if for some reason you tried to do that, you would get an error message, okay? So keep that in mind. And then anywhere where you don't have a value, you put in a 0. Same rules apply for gender, race, and ethnicity. You have a total of 4 people being counted. You're going to want to try to capture those values for all 4 people, right? Household with parenting children. These are for households where nobody in the household is over the age of 18. These are households where it's a parenting child scenario, 17-year-old with a 1-year-old, or cohabitating teenagers with a 1 or 2-year-old. So a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old with a 1-year-old. Those would be considered an unaccompanied parenting child household. So households with parenting children, for the majority of the programs out there, you're going to be all zeros for these tables, unless you're an RHY or YHDP funded program, then you would have some data here. And same rules here, you're going to say, so your total number of households is 1, we'll say that 0. Total number of parents would be 1, total number of children with that parent would be 1. Okay, and again, the table knows that if this is 1, this has to be at least 2, because it's looking for at least 1 parent and at least 1 child with that parent, okay? And then fill in the rest of the demographics for everybody in the household. Again, get as close to the total number of persons as you can. The key rule here is that there's nobody in the household over the age of 18, okay? Everybody is 18, is under, 17 and under, all right? So that would be your households with parenting children. Your households with unaccompanied children. This is the household, again, for RHY and YHTP programs where there is a child who is representing alone, 17 years old, runaway, and there's nobody with them who's over the age of 18, and they're not a parent either. They don't have a child with them. This is where they would go. You could have 1 household of 1, or you could have 1 household of more than 1. It could be cohabitating teenagers. It could be siblings, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, whatever it may be. But the key here is they're unaccompanied children, not part of any other household where there's anybody over the age of 18, right? For the majority of these projects, similar to the table above, you're not going to have data here. You're just going to be supplying zeros. So just make sure that you do that for every table or every field here, that you supply the 0 value, okay? Those are the primary tables, okay? The 4 primary tables: households with at least 1 adult and 1 child, households without children, and then the parenting child and unaccompanied child. Those are the primaries. Now we're getting into the subpopulation tables. The veteran households with at least 1 adult and 1 child. These would be those households where there's a veteran and there's children with that veteran, meaning somebody under the age of 18. So what you want to look at is you want to look at that very first table, households with at least 1 adult and 1 child. You want to ask yourself, how many of these households have a veteran? If there's a veteran in one of the households, then you're going to supply that data down here as well. So we can say there's 1 household, non-chronic, we'll say total number of persons 1, total number, I'm sorry, total number of persons 2, total number of veterans is 1 and 0 chronic. Now, again, you're pulling this data, or this data is basically not separate from your total population of households with at least 1 adult and 1 child. This is the number of veterans within your households with at least one adult and one child. So if your program, if you have 10 households with adults and children, one of those households is also a veteran household, you supply their data above, and then you carve out that data and you supply it here as well. So you have one household, there's 2 total people because there has to be at least one person over 18 and at least one person under 18, and then the total number of veterans in that household. It could be 1 or higher. It just can't be 0 because this table is expecting there to be a count of at least 1 veteran for every household. So for example, if you did this and you did that, but that stayed as a 1, that would be an error. If there's a 2 here, there has to be at least 2 there. If there's a 2 here, there has to be at least 4 here, okay? The database will give you errors where there's logic issues when it's evaluating the data that you're entering, okay? So for here, please note that this demographic information is for the veteran only. You would not supply data that totaled up to 4 here. You would only supply data that totaled up to 2. If you said 2 and 2 and you tried to save, you would get an error message because the demographics here is only looking for a total of 2 for the veteran data, not a total of 4. Okay, so just make sure that again that you keep that in mind, that the total number of demographics for gender, race, and ethnicity equals the total number of veterans. Anything you don't have a value for would be a 0. So make sure you supply that 0 in all the empty boxes. Okay. Veteran households without children, again, is another subpopulation. So if you go back up to your households without children, all right, here's my households without children. I have 3 total households, 4 total people. We'll say one of those households is a veteran. Now, here you could have 1 household, you could have 1 person, say 0, and 1 veteran. Okay, that's perfectly fine. Again, households has to, or a number of persons has to be equal to or greater than households, can't be less. And just keep in mind, if there's a person in the household with a veteran, it's totally fine to say that you have 1 household of 2 people and 1 veteran. That's fine. You could also have 1 household, 2 people, and 2 veterans, because it could be cohabitating veterans. The key here is there's just no children. There's nobody under the age of 18 in these households. So that's why it's a subpopulation of your overall households without children population, okay? What you could not have is a situation that was this. If you tried that, you would get an alert because you have 1 household, so this would have to be at least 1. If you tried this and you had that, you would get an error because again, if you have 2 here, you have to have at least 2 there, okay? So if you try to save, as above, similar scenario, if you tried to save something like this, you would get an error message, okay? So let's just correct that. And as with the table above, this is just veteran demographics, so only provide the veteran demographics there. If you provide totals that are greater than the total number of veterans, you'll get an error message. If you don't have the data, just supply a 0, okay? In all the cells you don't have data. All right. Now, youth population data. This is where it gets a little bit sticky, but we'll walk through it. Now, you'll see there's some data here already because for the parenting youth households, we supplied some information above. In the parenting child table, let's assume you have a runaway homeless youth program, you supplied some information. Well, the system can actually take that and use it. It can take that data and say, okay, well, we know that we can migrate that data down here to populate at the very least the situations where it's an unaccompanied parenting child because you supplied that information. What the system can't do is it is not able to know the difference between a parenting youth household on your households with at least 1 adult and 1 child table. It has no way of knowing that this person is a parent and one of these is not the parent. So there's no way for the system to pull that data down for you. So this is what I was talking about earlier when I said, make sure to take note of your parenting youth households because you're going to need that later. okay? So let's assume that here's your parenting youth and one of these child goes with that parent. Then you would have one household where there is a parenting youth scenario. So here's your parenting youth household. So this constitutes the total number of parents who are under 18, along with any parents who are 18 to 24. And we just said we had one, okay? Now it wants to know number of children with that parent, and we're going to say one, okay? And we'll just say chronic here and chronic here. Now, you are also going to have to supply the household count, okay? So you know you have one household for your parenting youth and one household for your unaccompanied children. So you have two households to make up the total number of for the total households, and then it's going to calculate your total persons for you. It pulled down that you had two parents who are under the age of 18 with one child, and then you told it there's also one parenting youth 18 to 24 with a child, okay? It also pulled down for you that you had two parents for that parenting youth or parenting child household and one child in that parenting child household. Okay, so it's going to populate that, the data, any data it can, it's going to grab for you. If it can't, then you're going to have to supply it here. So this would be how you would backfill the parenting youth data, where you have a parent who's between the age of 18 to 24 and a child that is in that household. Now, keep in mind, again, these age ranges are important. If there is a 24-year-old with a 25-year-old and a 2-year-old, that is not a parenting youth situation, okay? That is simply a households with at least one adult and one child scenario. If they're cohabitating and there's one person over the age of 24, then they would not go on this table. The only people on this table are 18 to 24-year-old parents with a child or under 18-year-old parents with a child, okay? Also note here, these are for the parents only. So you only want to supply the demographics on the total number of parents, okay? Don't try to do it on the total number of persons. In this case, you have your total parent count is 3 because you have 2 parents for the child, the under 18 household, and 1 parent for the 18 to 24-year-old household. Okay? So supply that data based on their gender, race, and ethnicity. Anything you don't know, as always, is a 0. Okay? For most of you, you're not going to have households under the age of 18 who are unaccompanied. You will or may have households where there's an 18 to 24-year-old parent, so that might be common. But unless you're RH or RYHTP, you're going to have 0s for the minors who are parents. Last table is the unaccompanied youth households. These are the households where it's an unaccompanied youth, 18 to 24, or an unaccompanied child under the age of 18. So as you can see here, this field is grayed out because if you had supplied data to the unaccompanied child table up above, it would be pulled down for you. Now you can also supply any data for the households without children table where that household was a youth household. And that would take you back up here, households without children. If any of these households that you supplied data for is a youth household, meaning somebody 18 to 24 who's presenting alone. So let's say in this scenario, we have that. Let me just increase this by 1, and we'll increase that by 1. So this would be a scenario where you could say, and again, the system has no way of knowing that this person is an unaccompanied youth. It doesn't know that they're not part of a household. So this is why you would have to tell it that one of these households is an unaccompanied youth, meaning the person's 18 to 24, they're presenting alone. Nobody else in the household is over the age of 24, and obviously there's nobody under the age of 18 with them, because that would make them a youth parent. In this case, this is an unaccompanied youth. So a couple that present a 24-year-old and a 26-year-old, that would not be an unaccompanied youth setting, but a 19-year-old and a 22-year-old, that would be unaccompanied youth. So that would be one household of 2 people because there's nobody over the age of 24 in the household. You're going to come down here and you're going to supply the data for your unaccompanied youth scenarios. Let's say we have one. and you have at least, you have one person, 18 to 24, we'll say they're non-chronic. Okay, so that's perfectly fine, and it's going to give you the total number of persons, and then you're just going to provide the total person information for gender, race, and ethnicity. Okay, you could have something like this: one household, and you could have two people. That would be fine as long as both people in that household are 18 to 24. But again, those are the keys, is just to pay attention to the ages here. And if you have any households where there's minors. Again, RHY, YHTP are probably the only ones that are going to have data here for non-HMIS participating programs. And as I said, total persons, your gender, race, and ethnicity would total up here. Okay. All right. So once you're confident in the numbers, you can come down and see your totals: total number of households and total number of persons. These total household counts are coming from your primary tables. The primary tables are households with at least one adult and one child, households without children, households with parenting children, and households with unaccompanied children. Okay? Those are these purplish headings here. Those are your primary tables. Your secondary tables are your veteran, sub-pop, veteran households with, veteran households without, parenting children, and unaccompanied. Those are your sub-pop tables. So down here is only calculating the household data and people count data from your primary tables. Reason being is, if you recall, these are just subpopulations. These are of all your people in your primary tables, how many are veteran, how many are unaccompanied children, how many are unaccompanied youth, okay? So as long as the total household count and total person count makes sense based on the total person served, you're okay to move forward. You'll see that the PIT app is also going to tell you how many beds you counted on the bed count side. So it's going to tell you you're counting 32 beds and you have 12 total people. That is an underutilization setting, or scenario rather. So you're going to want to provide an explanation of the underutilization. If you expected this number to be 32, go back and take a look and see where you may have made a mistake. 5-minute rule still applies here. If you can't, within about 5 minutes, figure out why this is 12 and not 32, submit a help desk ticket, okay? It is most likely something simple that we can help you figure out in a very short period of time versus you taking the time to try to rack your brain to figure out why it's counting 12 and not 32. All right. So once you're again confident and comfortable with the numbers, you've provided either an overutilization or underutilization. The last step for non-HMIS programs is for the additional homeless populations, total number of people with mental illness, substance abuse, HIV, or domestic violence history. This will grab all adults. It'll automatically grab that for the DV programs, but what it won't do is it won't provide this information because it doesn't know that. So you will have to provide that if you know the totals for these categories. For the adults, please note the adults with mental illness, substance abuse, and HIV. You can put zeros there if you don't know, that's fine. If you do know the answers, go ahead and supply that. Once you're done, you want to certify the data and hit save, okay? And then you're ready to move on at that point. PSH, RRH, hotel, motel, all the same rules apply to what you just witnessed. Those programs you'll see the same thing for your PIT-only programs. You'll be required to provide all that data. VASH programs, again, unfortunately, as years passed, you have to supply the primary data tables and the veteran data tables. But again, you're just basically copying what you already got and just bringing it down to the other tables, making sure the totals are correct, and you're good to go. Any questions about the non-participating or non-HMIS programs and how to fill out those tables? Or did everybody leave?
Any questions? Now's the time.
Still here, Jim. I didn't know I unmuted myself. Thank God I wasn't mumbling. It's John from HUD-VASH.
Yeah, hey, John. Yeah, John, I'd love to get a CSV file out of the VA system, if you have all your VASH clients in a database, and that database can produce a CSV file, we can probably auto-populate your data for you. Won't be able to do it this year, but we should definitely see what exists in whatever database the VA uses, because that would save a lot of time, I think.
I mean, it's worth a conversation. My guess is it would be an act of Congress, frankly,
Yeah.
as the
Yeah.
saying goes. But and we talk about this on a national level for those of us that do this. It's really just challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, these age categories might not seem like a lot, but we don't
Oh,
have
no, they
stuff
are.
broken down that way.
Yeah.
And there's the way we have it entered, there's a very simple mechanism in place, and I don't know if we're going to be able to tweak it to get these new categories. So that's kind of going manually almost.
Yeah. So you do have a place where you track like date of birth and in some way, yeah. And then is there a way that they're linked as far as families go? Like this person and this person are together as like a family identifier or anything like that?
Yeah, Megan, who was with us last year, did develop, a system that was tracking some of that, but she's no longer with us.
Yeah.
And, it was our first go at it last year, and she was sort of the champion. I think Molly might still be on the call.
Yeah. So Jim, the challenge is that we don't track any of this data that you guys want, except for our, and so we have to go in and search and literally talk to every individual 900 people to try to figure out what the data is. And that's why it's not working.
But the other way it might work though is the housing authorities does have this data, and for those that cooperate with us, they might have stuff that they can get to you easier than the stuff we're able to, and then we just have to identify the veteran component and separate out the children and spouses, etc. Non-veterans.
Yeah. So if there's a place where the household data lives, it would be worth looking at that system, or at the very least, seeing what system could be created. But again, it would still take the data entry. Somebody would still have to put it there.
But you know what? I mean, in that particular system, but like HUD, for example, we use Nora up at the HUD regional or the Hartford office.
Yeah.
And she was able to track data we were missing that we couldn't get from the housing authority. So like there is a central repository of sorts that this all ends up. And I think maybe that's the place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guarantee a CSV could be generated out of that system. There's very few systems that don't do that now, where it doesn't have a CSV export, or at the very least an Excel export.
And just for like people like me, CSV is?
It's just that it's comma separated value is what it stands for. It's just
I knew that.
Yeah, it's just a different format of how data gets exported. But essentially, it can be it can look like an Excel spreadsheet. So, but if we can get on a call with somebody, I can have Adam, our developer, available, and we can see what's possible to try to save you guys some pain every year.
Yeah, I mean, to hear that HMIS is, doing all the work that's going on behind the scenes to make this sort of happen on its own for information that's, vital. I mean, as Molly said, we have, 800 people housed that we're going to be counting, which is a very significant permanent housing number for you guys, for all of us to have. It's worth it, because this is, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's just tedious and labor intensive.
Yeah. So, again, I think if you can arrange something, if you and Molly want to arrange something with whomever you think might have access to that data, let's see what we can do.
Yeah. And I know, like, even for a smaller, not smaller, but like D'Amelia and Associates through the Department of Housing, they have a very large number of vouchers with us. West Haven and Hartford Housing Authority. I mean, if we could tackle those three alone, that would ease the burden. Where these smaller places, it's a little easier. We can almost use our fingers and toes, so to speak. Molly, let's talk offline, and we'll involve Nora from up at in the HUD office, who helped us last year, and see what she says, and then invite Jim. Super, good idea. Oh, and thank you, everybody. Sorry to bother
Yeah.
you with our
Oh,
VA
no, no
stuff.
problem, Jim. Yeah,
Very good.
that's all right.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, and we have some information. I don't know if they collect, but again, it'd be interesting to see on the report in terms of mental health and substance abuse.
Yeah.
You know, it'd just be interesting to see. You know,
Yeah,
I'm always, when at the end of this, I look and say, look at, you know, we're always concentrating on the number of vouchers and veterans. Look at the family members. You know, there's 150 extra people we're serving.
Yeah.
You know, that are no longer homeless because of our program on top of the veterans, which is nice. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it'd definitely be interesting to see what we could pull from there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Molly, did you have anything else?
No. Okay.
I know she's still here.
Yeah, she's there. Yep, she was shaking her head. Yeah, but definitely, as I've said too along this process, anybody out there, again, you run into any hiccups, don't go crazy trying to resolve it. There's a few of us on the help desk that can help and help you figure out what numbers you need to put in there. So.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Okay, get back to screen.
Yep.
You guys see the contact information, all that good stuff. Okay, so Jim, again, thank you for that. It's always useful and a pleasure to see those demonstrations. You know, we do a lot of things virtually, but you know, taking the time to go step by step proves beneficial for everybody involved. We're getting ready to wrap up. I just want to go over some last minute details, some important contact information, reiterate some important dates. So here, and again, all this will be emailed out. It'll be on our website, hopefully tomorrow, but the actual slides in the PDF format, I'm just going to email out to everybody first thing tomorrow morning, and then the same thing for the unsheltered presentation tomorrow. So this is our email addresses, mine, Shannon, Lindsay's, and Jim's. Let me see here. Here's some more contact information, more of a general sense. Nutmeg Help Desk. Just to plug, anytime you email Nutmeg, please be as detailed as possible. They get a lot of help desk tickets, and although you are all special, there's no way for them to know who you are unless they tell you, unless you tell them. CT Boss and ODFC. CT Boss contact is Housing Innovations, but this is the email address that you use. And as far as ODFC, Lindsay has joined us, and she is on the call, and that's her email address. Same rule applies. They don't know you until you introduce yourself, so please tell them who you are.
Can I confirm something for the for the help desk? If somebody's, you know, there's a lot of staff turnover at some of these projects, so if some staff are new and non-HMIS program and don't have access to the PIT database yet, do they just email the help desk?
Yeah. Yes, and just let us know that it's for the PIT count. We need to know, what program you need access to, what agency you're with.
Okay.
Because if you're non-HMIS, then we don't have a lot of information.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Shannon. I didn't even think of that. I'll make sure I mention that in the email tomorrow to everybody.
Yeah, whenever you submit a ticket for PIT, just lead it with PIT count and then whatever your question is.
Perfect. Okay, so it's a little parched. All right, so let's just go over some details. The night of the count is going to be January 24th, 2023. It's about 19 days from now. The next morning, on the 25th of January, you can begin certifying your population data within the PIT database. You have to wait, but you can get your ducks in a row ahead of time. Make sure that your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted, but you do have to wait to the 25th. You have about a week. The deadline is going to be the 31st of January, 2023. It's 1 week after the count. Just for folks who have been doing this with us for a while, you will probably get daily emails from me. Doesn't mean anything's wrong. I just like to give progress reports and let folks know, hey, we're going in the right direction, just to have that communication since we're not outside. I will be working the entire time. So if you have a question, you can email me and I'll email you back. I'm even working through the weekend that time. So keep that in mind. So the website, our Advancing Connecticut Together HCPC website, it's in the chat. It's one landing page for all of the details. So that same landing page will get you plugged up with the desk guides that Jim was referring to, the previous recordings of videos. Obviously, they will be replaced with today's and tomorrow's, but anything that you need, you should be able to find on that website. And if for some reason you can't, just email me and we could talk. Forms, bed change forms, Shannon mentioned, in the very seldom situation where, hey, you got some more funding, something open, you need to do that, go ahead and do that and email it either to CTBOSS or ODFC if the situation calls for it. But that information is on our landing page. Okay.
Just a quick note,
Yeah.
for PSH and TH programs, we do historically have allowed usually the week up to the PIT count, they can start confirming their people count data just because they don't tend to have much turnover, whereas emergency shelters, obviously, and street outreach have to wait until the night of the PIT count, but just to throw that out there.
Perfect, that's a good point.
I also wanted to add, we've talked, there's a lot of this language that is very, very specific to HUD, even just saying HIC and PIT. They're the acronyms we use all the time, which we assume people know. We've talked about emergency shelters. We've talked about drop-in centers or warming centers. I want to say something about the language to that. Though all people in those centers, if they're sleeping in any of those on the night of the count, they're considered homeless, so they should be pulled into the count. But HUD doesn't consider somebody sheltered homeless unless they are in a bed or a cot or sleeping on a mat. So for instance, if you have a drop-in center and people are just sleeping in chairs, we want to count them, but they're going to be counted on the unsheltered side. If you have a warming center and you have cots there or mats there, then that needs to be, Jim was kind of referring to, considered an emergency shelter, because that's how HUD's going to see them. They're going to see them as sheltered homeless as opposed to unsheltered homeless. So I know that Lee from DOH has sent out some questions to some warming centers or drop-in centers, asking you all if you have one of those, and people are staying in them, do they have cots and mats? And sometimes I feel like our questions seem like idiotic, for lack of a better word. Like, why do you care all of these details? But this is why we care, because it matters on how we report things. So if you feel like we want to clarify with any of us how your projects, shelters, drop-in centers, warming centers are assigned, or look them up, make sure you think they are where they say they are. If they aren't, contact the help desk and clarify if they should be different.
Thank you so much, Shannon, much appreciated. Okay, questions. We've obviously been hearing your questions, reading your questions, responding to your questions in the chat. Again, just to reiterate, this will be posted on our website. The link is in our chat, for lack of better terms. Everything that we discussed, you'll be able to see. You will be able to follow along with the recording if that's how you choose to learn. You'll also be able to just look at the PDFs with the step-by-step guides. We're going to make sure everything like that is updated. Today was the sheltered piece of the project. However, I know a number of you kind of work in both spaces. So if you feel that being a part of the unsheltered refresher training tomorrow is something that would benefit you and your team, by all means, you're more than welcome. I sent the same invite to everybody, so that is available. It's going to be tomorrow the same time. Okay, so a few people have to go. Are there any questions? I'm going to stop recording in a moment.
I just want to make one more statement to make sure that you guys recognize which COC you're a part of. So when you're sending out your emails with any last minute bed change forms or any questions regarding the projects that you're reporting on, please, please, please make sure that you are aware if you are either in Fairfield County or if you are part of CT Boss, and send the appropriate email. I am for Fairfield County. Shannon and her team with the Housing Innovations are for CT Boss. If you send me an email and I don't recognize the name, I'm going to be more delayed in responding to you because I'm going to see a whole lot of other emails for people for the pit for my region that I know need to get a response from me. And I don't want that to happen, and your emails will get delayed because I may think it's spam, I may not really know, or whatever. So please, please, please make sure you recognize what COC you're a part of and contact the appropriate people. If you're not sure, email both of us and we'll sort it out that way. That's my soapbox. Thank you.
Much appreciated. All right, folks, 31 minutes of the day is yours. I hope to see you all soon. I know I'll see some of you tomorrow, but if not, good luck with the count. We made some adjustments, as you know, but I believe in our state, as cheesy as it sounds, and let's go ahead and keep it going. We'll be rocking and rolling in 19 days. All right, everybody, you have a good one, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye.